Life had never been kind to Abigail Carter. At 26, she was already accustomed to the daily grind of Brooklyn's less glamorous neighborhoods, the overcrowded subway rides, the double shifts at the local diner, and the constant struggle to make rent on her tiny studio apartment. With mousy brown hair often tied in a practical ponytail and plain features that disappeared in a crowd, Abby had learned to move through life unnoticed. That's what made the events of that fateful Tuesday in May so extraordinarily improbable. "Abby, I need a huge favor." Her cousin Melissa's voice crackled through the phone. Melissa worked for Luminous, an exclusive cosmetics brand that catered to the ultra-wealthy. "I'm supposed to make a delivery to Windward Estate today, but I've caught this stomach bug that's going around. I can't leave the bathroom for more than 10 minutes. Abby sighed, glancing at her watch. Her shift at the diner didn't start until 4. "Where's Windward Estate? Brooklyn?" Melissa's laugh sounded strained. "Not exactly. It's on Osprey Island, that private retreat off the coast of Maine. But don't worry, the company jet will take you there and back. All you have to do is drop off the package to the staff. It's a simple delivery." "A private island? A company jet? Melissa, I don't—" "Please, Abby. It's for Alexander Pierce. You know, the tech billionaire who went blind after that car accident? He never receives anyone personally. You'll just hand the package to his staff and be back in New York by dinner. I'll owe you big time." Those words, "I'll owe you big time," had always been Abby's downfall. Growing up in a family where favors were currency, she'd never learned to say no. Besides, the thought of flying on a private jet, even just for an errand, held an undeniable allure. 6 hours later, Abby found herself stepping off a sleek Cessna, citation onto a private airstrip, surrounded by dense pine forest. The air smelled of salt and wilderness, cleaner than anything she'd breathed in years. A black SUV with tinted windows waited nearby. "Ms. Reynolds?" A tall man in a crisp suit approached her. "I'm Ethan, head of security for Windward Estate. We'll escort you to the main house." Abby opened her mouth to correct him. She wasn't Melissa Reynolds, but something in his efficient manner made her hesitate. Before she could clarify, he had already taken the elegant packaging box from her hands and was guiding her toward the vehicle. The drive revealed glimpses of Osprey Island's breathtaking beauty. Rocky coastlines breaking into secluded coves, towering pines swaying against the backdrop of a brilliant blue sky, and finally, perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic, Windward Estate itself. The modernist mansion of glass, stone, and steel seemed to emerge from the very rock, both imposing and somehow at peace with its surroundings. "The annual solstice gathering begins tomorrow," Ethan informed her as they approached the house. "Mr. Pierce hosts it every year for select guests from around the world. The staff is quite busy with preparations." Abby nodded, clutching her small crossbody bag. "I'll just drop this off and be on my way then." Ethan's expression remained professionally neutral. "Actually, Ms. Reynolds, you're expected to join the preparation briefing. Mr. Pierce insists that all special consultants understand the protocols for the event." "But I'm not," Abby began, only to be interrupted as they pulled up to the house. The entrance hall of Windward Estate took her breath away. Soaring ceilings, walls of glass that framed the ocean like living art, and an impressive spiral staircase that seemed to float without support. Everything spoke of thoughtful design and immense wealth, yet without ostentation. It was elegant rather than gaudy, refined rather than showy. "This way, please," Ethan directed, leading her through corridors where staff members moved with quiet efficiency, preparing for what was clearly a significant event. Abby found herself ushered into a spacious room where about a dozen people were gathered, some in business attire, others in what appeared to be specialized uniforms. A striking woman with silvery blonde hair cut in a severe bob stood at the front consulting a tablet. "Ah, Miss Reynolds has arrived," the woman said, her voice carrying the crisp accent of old New England money. "I'm Victoria Harrington, Mr. Pierce's Chief of Staff. You're the last to join us." Abby clutched the cosmetics package tighter, her heartbeat accelerating. This was getting out of hand. She needed to explain the mix-up immediately, but before she could speak, the room fell silent. Alexander Pierce entered, and the air itself seemed to change. He moved with a confidence that belied his blindness, his hand barely touching the arm of the young man guiding him. Tall, with broad shoulders and the lean build of someone who maintained rigorous physical discipline, he commanded attention without effort. His features were striking. A strong jaw, high cheekbones, and eyes the color of storm clouds that, despite their unseeing nature, seemed to take in everything. His dark hair, touched with silver at the temples, was impeccably styled. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice was deep and resonant, "welcome to Windward. For those joining us for the first time, I appreciate your discretion and your expertise." Abby stood frozen, a deer in headlights, as Alexander Pierce continued outlining expectations. For the solstice gathering, she should speak up. She should explain that she was just here for a delivery, that she wasn't Melissa, that this was all an absurd misunderstanding. But something held her back, not just intimidation, but a strange fascination with this man and the world he inhabited. The briefing concluded, and Victoria began assigning roles and accommodations. "Ms. Reynolds, you'll be in the East Wing, Suite 4. As Mr. Pierce's personal image consultant for the event, you'll need to be accessible. I've scheduled your one-on-one session with him for 5 o'clock. Abby's mouth went dry. Personal image. Consultant, one-on-one session? This had gone beyond a simple mix-up. She needed to come clean immediately. "Miss Harrington, there's been a mistake," she finally managed. "I'm not comfortable with the timeline," Victoria cut in smoothly. "I understand, but Mr. Pierce was quite specific. He rarely allows new consultants, but your work with celebrity clients impressed him. But 5 o'clock, Suite 4, don't be late." Victoria's tone left no room for discussion as she moved on to the next person. Abby stood rooted to the spot as the room emptied. What had she gotten herself into? She watched as Alexander Pierce conversed quietly with an older woman in a housekeeper's uniform, the only staff member who seemed to speak to him with familiar ease. There was something compelling about him, an intensity that made her curious, despite her panic. A young staff member approached her. "Ms. Reynolds, I'll show you to your suite now." As Abby followed, her mind raced through her options. She could still confess everything, risk embarrassment, and be on the next flight back to New York. That would be the sensible choice. The only choice, really. Yet as she entered the luxurious suite overlooking the ocean, larger than her entire apartment, something shifted inside her. For once in her unremarkable life, couldn't she experience something extraordinary? Just for a day. What harm could it do to play along until she figured out a graceful exit? The clock on the wall read 4:30 p.m. 30 minutes until her meeting with Alexander Pierce. 30 minutes to decide whether to confess everything or step into a role she had no business playing. 30 minutes that would change the course of her life forever. The hands of the antique clock ticked relentlessly toward 5 o'clock as Abby paced her suite, anxiety building with each passing minute. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a woman she barely recognized, plain Abby Carter from Brooklyn, now standing in a luxury suite overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, about to meet one of the wealthiest men in America under completely false pretenses. "This is insane," she muttered, splashing cold water on her face. "I need to come clean before this goes any further." A gentle knock at the door made her jump. It was the elderly housekeeper she had seen speaking with Alexander Pierce earlier. "Ms. Reynolds, I'm Eleanor Walsh, head of household staff." The county woman's kind eyes crinkled at the corners, her silver hair pulled back in a practical bun. "Mr. Pierce asked me to escort you to his study." Abby's stomach tightened. "Mrs. Walsh, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not actually nervous." Eleanor's smile was warm. "That's perfectly natural. Mr. Pierce has that effect on most people when they first meet him, but I assure you he values authenticity above all else. Authenticity." The irony wasn't lost on Abby as she followed Eleanor through the winding corridors of Windward Estate. The mansion was a masterpiece of thoughtful design. Every element seemed chosen to enhance both beauty and function. Textured walls for guidance, subtle changes in flooring to indicate transitions, and ambient sounds from carefully placed water features, all creating a space navigable by touch and sound. Mr. Pierce redesigned the entire estate after his accident, Eleanor explained. Noticing Abby's observations, he wanted a home that worked with his blindness, not against it. They stopped before an imposing oak door. Eleanor knocked softly. "Enter," came the deep voice from within. Alexander Pierce's study was unlike any room Abby had ever seen. 3. Walls were lined with books, actual physical books in an age when most had gone digital. The fourth wall was entirely glass, framing the dramatic coastline. The furniture was minimal but luxurious. A large desk of polished walnut, several comfortable leather chairs, and various sculptures that seemed positioned for tactile appreciation rather than visual display. Pierce himself stood by the window, his profile etched against the fading daylight. He turned as they entered, his movements precise and deliberate. "Ms. Reynolds, sir," Eleanor announced. "Thank you, Eleanor. That will be all for now." As the door closed behind Eleanor, Abby found herself alone with Alexander Pierce. The silence stretched between them, heavy with expectation. "Ms. Reynolds," he finally said, gesturing toward a chair. "Please sit." Abby moved forward carefully, her footsteps betraying her nervousness on the hardwood floor. "Your footsteps tell me you're uncomfortable," Pierce observed, his unseeing eyes somehow finding her position. "First time visiting Osprey Island?" "Yes," Abby answered truthfully, her voice barely above a whisper. A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. "You sound different than I expected." "Different?" Abby's heart raced. "On the phone with Victoria, you sounded more polished. In person, your voice has more texture, more authenticity." He moved with surprising grace to a chair opposite her. "It's refreshing." Abby swallowed hard. "Mr. Pierce, about my being here, please call me Alexander." He leaned forward, hands clasped. "I rarely bring in new consultants, but Victoria was insistent about your unique approach. She says you've worked with clients who want something beyond the standard image makeover." "I'm not sure I understand," Abby said cautiously. "Of course you do. You specialize in authenticity, helping public figures present their true selves rather than manufactured personas. That's precisely what this solstice gathering needs." Abby remained silent, uncertain how to respond. This was her moment to confess everything, yet the intensity of Alexander's presence made the words stick in her throat. "You see," he continued, "this annual gathering has become increasingly political over the years. Influential people pretending to be friends while advancing their own agendas. I'm tired of it. This year I want something different, something genuine." The irony of his seeking authenticity, while she sat before him under false pretenses, wasn't lost on Abby. "Mr. Pierce, Alexander, I think there might be a mistake. I'm not sure I'm the person you're looking for." He tilted his head, considering. "You doubt yourself. That's another refreshing quality. Most consultants I've worked with oversell their abilities." He rose suddenly, moving to a nearby shelf, where his fingers traced the spines of several books. "Are you familiar with Ralph Waldo Emerson, Ms. Reynolds?" "Abby," she corrected automatically, then winced at her slip. "Abby," he repeated, seeming to taste the name. "A diminutive of Abigail, I presume. It suits you better than Melissa." She froze. "How did you—" "I may be blind, but I'm not oblivious." His smile held no malice. "Her Victoria insists on using formal names, but I prefer what people actually call themselves." He selected a book, brought it back to his seat. Emerson wrote that, "To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment." What do you think of that? The question hung in the air between them. Abby felt herself at a crossroads. Continue the charade or tell the truth? Neither option seemed safe. "I think," she said slowly, "that being yourself is harder than it sounds." Alexander's expression softened. "Indeed it is." He opened the book, his fingers tracing the raised braille dots, "especially when you're asked to be someone you're not." Was he testing her? Did he somehow know she wasn't Melissa Reynolds? The tension in the room was palpable. "Tell me, Abby," he continued, "what made you choose this particular career path, helping people present their authentic selves?" The question felt like a trap, yet also an opportunity. Abby took a deep breath, deciding to offer the truth, if not the whole truth. "I grew up watching people put on masks," she said, thinking of her childhood in a neighborhood where appearances often masked struggle. Everyone pretending to be something they weren't. "I always thought there was something powerful about people brave enough to be genuine." Alexander listened intently, his expression unreadable. "And are you being genuine now, Abby?" The question struck her like a physical blow. "Not entirely," she admitted, her voice barely audible. To her surprise, he laughed, a warm, rich sound that transformed his austere features. "Finally, someone who doesn't lie to the blind man. You knew that you're not the image consultant Victoria hired?" "Yes, I suspected as soon as you entered the room. Your hesitation, your footsteps, the way you breathe when nervous, all different from the confident professional Victoria described." He leaned back in his chair. "What I don't know is who you actually are, and why you're pretending to be someone else in my home." This was it, the moment of truth. Abby felt a curious mixture of relief and terror as she prepared to explain herself. "My name is Abigail Carter. I'm a waitress from Brooklyn. My cousin Melissa works for Luminous Cosmetics and was supposed to make this delivery today, but she got sick. She asked me to fill in just to drop off the package. When I arrived, everyone assumed I was her. It all happened so fast, and before I could explain, I was in a briefing about this solstice gathering." She expected anger, perhaps even humiliation, but Alexander's expression remained composed, almost curious. "A simple case of mistaken identity," he mused, "and yet you chose to continue the pretense rather than correct it immediately. Why?" Abby struggled with how to answer. "I tried several times, but no one would listen. And then, I don't know, it seemed like an adventure, something completely different from my everyday life. An adventure at my expense," he noted, though without rancor. "I'm sorry," she said, sincerely. "I never meant to deceive anyone, especially not you. I'll leave immediately." Alexander was silent for a long moment, his unseeing eyes fixed somewhere beyond her. "The real Melissa Reynolds will arrive tomorrow morning. Victoria will be furious about this mix-up." "I understand," Abby said, rising from her chair. "I'll pack my things." "I didn't say you should leave." She froze. "What?" "Sit down, Abby. Carter from Brooklyn." When she hesitated, he added, "Please." Slowly, she sank back into her chair. "In 48 hours, my home will be filled with some of the most powerful people in the country. Politicians, CEOs, influencers, all experts at presentation and deception. Meanwhile, my actual image consultant is apparently too ill to arrive until tomorrow, leaving me short-handed during crucial preparation time." He leaned forward. "And here you are, a woman honest enough to admit she's living a lie. I find that intriguing." "I don't understand. I'm offering you a job, Abby. Not as an image consultant, obviously, but as something potentially more valuable, an honest voice in a sea of practiced deceit." His fingers drummed thoughtfully on the arm of his chair. "Stay for the gathering. Observe my guests. Tell me what you see, not as someone trained to analyze power dynamics, but as someone who recognizes authenticity when she encounters it." Abby blinked in surprise. "You want me to spy on your guests?" "I want you to be my eyes in a way that goes beyond the physical. You seem to have keen instincts about people." He stood, signaling the end of their conversation. "Think about it. If you choose to leave, Eleanor will arrange transportation back to New York. If you stay, come to breakfast in the main dining room at 8 tomorrow morning." He moved toward his desk, effectively dismissing her. Abby stood, her mind reeling from the unexpected turn of events. "Alexander," she said, pausing at the door, "why would you trust me after I lied to you?" He looked up, his clouded eyes, somehow finding her with uncanny precision. "Because you didn't have to tell me the truth just now, but you did. Sometimes the most trustworthy people are those who have already shown you their capacity for deception." As Abby returned to her suite, the ocean crashed against the cliffs below Windward Estate. The truth had been revealed, but instead of ending her strange adventure, it had opened the door to something even more unexpected. By tomorrow morning, she would need to decide: return to her ordinary life in Brooklyn, or step into an extraordinary role in a world that wasn't hers. Morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Abby's suite, illuminating dust motes that danced in the golden rays. She had barely slept, her mind racing with the impossible choice before her. The bedside clock read 7:30 a.m., 30 minutes until breakfast with Alexander Pierce. She moved to the window, gazing out at the Atlantic. Waves crashed against the rugged shoreline below, constant and eternal. Her ordinary life in Brooklyn seemed distant now, as though belonging to someone else. Had it really been just one day since she'd stepped off that private jet onto Osprey Island? The closet in her suite held an array of designer clothes, meant for Melissa, not for her. After a moment's hesitation, Abby selected a simple navy dress that seemed the least ostentatious of the options. Looking in the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. Abigail Carter, waitress from Brooklyn, now dressed in couture, standing in a billionaire's guest suite. "This is crazy," she whispered to her reflection. "I should just go home." But even as she thought it, she knew her decision was already made. The opportunity to experience this world, if only for a few days, and the curious proposition Alexander had presented, was too compelling to walk away from. With one last glance in the mirror, she headed toward the main dining room. Windward Estate was coming alive with activity. Staff members hurried through the corridors, making final preparations for the arriving guests. Floral arrangements appeared in alcoves overnight, their fragrances mingling in the air. Security personnel checked and rechecked entrances. The atmosphere hummed with anticipation. Eleanor intercepted Abby in the main hall. "Good morning, Miss Carter," she said with a warm smile, using Abby's real name. "Mr. Pierce mentioned you might be joining us for breakfast. This way, please." So he had expected her to stay. The thought both irritated and flattered Abby as she followed Eleanor to the dining room. Alexander sat alone at one end of a long table set for breakfast, his fingers skimming a Braille document. He looked up as they entered, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Abby," he said simply, "you decided to stay." "For now," she qualified, taking the seat Eleanor indicated to Alexander's right. "I'm still not sure this is a good idea." "Few worthwhile ideas seem good at first glance," he replied, setting aside his document. "Coffee?" The casual offer, as though they were old friends rather than strangers bound by an unusual bargain, caught her off guard. "Yes, thank you." Eleanor poured for both of them, then quietly withdrew, leaving them alone in the vast dining room. "Before we discuss arrangements," Alexander began, "I should explain that Victoria knows nothing of our arrangement. As far as she's concerned, you are still Melissa Reynolds, arriving early to familiarize yourself with the estate before the other guests arrive." Abby nearly choked on her coffee. "You want me to continue the pretense? Even after I admitted the truth? Only until the real Melissa arrives this afternoon. At that point, we'll need a new identity for you, one that explains your presence here without raising suspicions among the staff or guests." "And what identity would that be?" Abby asked warily. Alexander's expression grew thoughtful. "How's your reading voice?" "My what?" "Your reading voice when you read aloud." The question seemed so out of left field that Abby could only blink in confusion. "I don't know. Fine, I guess. I used to read to my younger cousins." Alexander nodded as though this confirmed something for him. "Since my accident, I've employed personal readers, people who read documents, books, and correspondence to me. My current reader, Michael, has taken ill and won't return until next week." "You want me to be your reader?" Abby set down her coffee cup. "But surely you have Braille, text-to-speech technology." "For business documents and practical matters, yes, but for literature, philosophy, poetry, nothing compares to the human voice. The nuances, the emotion, the subtle interpretations that technology can't replicate." Abby considered this. Being Alexander's reader would give her a plausible reason to be at his side throughout the gathering, perfectly positioned to observe his guests as he'd requested. It would also mean spending considerable time alone with him, a prospect that both unnerved and intrigued her, What would this job entail exactly? Reading to me for several hours each day, accompanying me to certain events as needed, and of course observing my guests when I'm not present, particularly those I'll point out to you. A servant entered with breakfast trays, momentarily pausing their conversation. When they were alone again, Abby leaned forward. "Why are you doing this, Alexander? Why trust a complete stranger, one who's already lied to you with something so unusual?" He took a slow sip of coffee before answering. "Because you don't belong in this world, Abby. You have no connections to these people, no agenda, no reason to be anything but honest with me about what you observe." His unseeing eyes seemed to find her face, and perhaps because it amuses me to have one genuine person amidst all the artifice this weekend. Before Abby could respond, the dining room doors opened again, and Victoria Harrington entered, tablet in hand. Her perfectly tailored suit and immaculate appearance made Abby feel instantly underdressed despite her designer outfit. Victoria stopped short upon seeing them together. "Mr. Pierce, Miss Reynolds, I wasn't aware you were having a private breakfast meeting." "Just getting acquainted," Alexander replied smoothly. "Miss Reynolds and I were discussing her role this weekend." Victoria's gaze swept over Abby, critical and assessing. "I see. Well, I should inform you that there's been a development. The real Miss Reynolds called this morning. Her illness has worsened, and she won't be able to join us at all for the gathering." Abby felt the blood drain from her face. Alexander, however, remained impassive. "That's unfortunate," he said mildly, "though perhaps fortuitous, as Miss Carter and I have already established a good working relationship." Victoria's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "Ms. Carter." Alexander set down his coffee cup. "Victoria, I believe some transparency is in order. This is Abigail Carter. She was sent to deliver the luminous products in Ms. Reynolds' place yesterday, and due to a series of misunderstandings, was mistaken for the consultant herself." "I see." Victoria's tone grew glacial. "So we have an imposter in our midst. I'll arrange for her immediate departure." "That won't be necessary," Alexander countered, his voice carrying an unmistakable note of authority. "I've offered Ms. Carter a position as my personal reader, replacing Michael for the duration of the gathering." Victoria's composure slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine shock before her professional mask returned. "Mr. Pierce, with all due respect, bringing an untested stranger into such a high-security event seems ill-advised. Several of your guests require the utmost discretion and security." "And they shall have it," Alexander assured her. "Ms. Carter has demonstrated both discretion and honesty, rare qualities I value highly." He turned toward Abby. "Would you excuse us for a moment? I need to discuss some logistical matters with Victoria." Taking the hint, Abby nodded, then realized he couldn't see the gesture. "Of course," she said, rising from her chair. "Thank you for breakfast." As she left the dining room, she could feel Victoria's cold stare following her. The chief of staff clearly viewed her as an intruder, a threat to the carefully orchestrated event she had planned, and perhaps she was right. What did Abby know about navigating the world of the ultra-wealthy and powerful? She was setting herself up for disaster. Yet as she walked through the sunlit corridors of Windward Estate, something kept her from packing her bags and demanding transportation back to New York. Maybe it was curiosity about the gathering to come. Maybe it was the unusual opportunity Alexander had presented. Or maybe, though she was reluctant to admit it, it was Alexander himself with his penetrating intelligence and the quiet intensity he radiated. Eleanor found her wandering the East Wing. "There you are, Miss Carter. Mr. Pierce asked me to show you to your new accommodations." "New accommodations? Now that your role has changed, you'll be staying in the Reader's Suite, adjacent to Mr. Pierce's private quarters for easier access when he requires your services." The Reader's Suite proved smaller than her previous room, but somehow more intimate and thoughtfully designed. A reading desk positioned near large windows captured perfect natural light. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes ranging from classic literature to modern philosophy, poetry to scientific journals. The intercom connects directly to Mr. Pierce's quarters, Eleanor explained, indicating a discreet panel on the wall. He often has trouble sleeping and prefers reading sessions late at night. I see, Abby said, trying to process this new development. So I'm actually going to do this? Be his reader? Eleanor's kind eyes crinkled with understanding. It's quite an unusual situation, isn't it? But in the 5 years I've worked for Mr. Pierce, I've come to trust his instincts about people. She moved toward the door, then paused. The first guests arrive at 4 this afternoon. Mr. Pierce asks that you join him in the library at 3 to prepare. After Eleanor left, Abby sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the rapid turn of events. In less than 24 hours, she had gone from delivery girl to imposter to personal reader for one of the most enigmatic billionaires in America, and now she would be witnessing firsthand the private interactions of the country's elite. Her phone buzzed with a text from, "Melissa, did you make the delivery? How did it go?" Abby stared at the message, unsure how to even begin explaining what had transpired. After a moment, she typed back, "Delivery complete. Got asked to stay on for a few days. Will explain later." She spent the next few hours exploring the estate grounds, trying to center herself before the gathering began. The property was even more magnificent in daylight, manicured gardens giving way to wilder coastal landscapes, hidden paths leading to secluded overlooks with breathtaking ocean views. It was a world constructed for beauty and contemplation, revealing as much about its owner as any conversation could. At precisely 3 o'clock, Abby made her way to the library, a 2-story room with walls of bookshelves accessible by rolling ladders. Alexander was already there, standing by a large desk where several books lay open. "Ah, Abby," he said, turning at the sound of her footsteps, "right on time." "You have a beautiful home," she offered, genuinely impressed after her explorations. "So, I'm told," he replied with a hint of dry humor. "I designed much of it after the accident, focusing on elements I could still appreciate, acoustics, textures, scents." He gestured toward the desk. "Shall we begin your orientation? The first guests will arrive soon." For the next hour, Alexander briefed her on her duties as his reader, the protocols of the gathering, and most importantly, the guests he wanted her to observe particularly closely. "Congressman James Wheeler," he explained. "Outwardly charming, but rumored to be negotiating private deals with tech companies while publicly advocating for breaking them up. I'm curious where his true allegiances lie." "Diana Frost, CEO of Frost Media Group. She's been trying to acquire my streaming platform for years. Watch for any unusual alliances she might be forming with other guests. And most importantly, Marcus Whitaker, my former business partner. We had a falling out when I refused to implement certain features in our products that I considered invasive of user privacy. He left to form his own company, but maintains relationships with many in my circle. I'm concerned he may be using this gathering to undermine some of my current projects." Abby listened carefully, increasingly aware of the complex web of relationships and rivalries she was being asked to navigate. "Alexander, I'm not sure I'm qualified for this. I don't know anything about corporate espionage or political maneuvering." "That's precisely why you're perfect," he countered. "You'll see them as people, not as strategic assets or threats. You'll notice things my regular advisors might miss because they're too close to the situation." As he spoke, the intercom on his desk buzzed. "Sir," came Victoria's voice, "the Whitaker's helicopter has just landed. They're arriving ahead of schedule." Alexander sighed. "So it begins. Are you ready, Abby?" No, she wasn't ready. Not for this world of power and privilege. Not for the role of confidant to a man she barely knew. Not for the web of deception and observation she was being drawn into. Yet she found herself nodding. "As ready as I'll ever be." He offered his arm, an old-world gesture that caught her by surprise. "Then let's greet our first guests together. Remember, you're my reader now. Nothing more, nothing less. Observe everything, react to nothing." As they walked arm in arm from the library, Abby couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping onto a stage, taking a role in a play whose script she didn't know. The solstice gathering was about to begin, and with it, her strange adventure among the powerful. The grand hall of Windward Estate buzzed with the practiced charm of America's elite. By evening, all 40 guests had arrived, CEOs in casual, luxury wear that cost more than Abby's monthly rent, politicians with camera-ready smiles, celebrities whose faces Abby recognized from magazine covers, and the less visible but equally powerful figures who operated behind the scenes of American industry and politics. Abby stood slightly behind Alexander as he greeted Marcus Whitaker and his wife Sophia. Marcus was everything Alexander was not: effusive, tactile, and performatively warm. His handshake lingered too long, his smile revealed too many teeth, his laughter came too readily. Sophia, by contrast, was a study in elegant restraint. Her beauty accentuated by minimal makeup and a simple black dress that probably cost more than a car. "Alex, you magnificent recluse." Marcus clapped Alexander on the shoulder. "The years have been kind to you. Still the brooding genius, I see." "And you're still prone to exaggeration, Marcus," Alexander replied with a tight smile. "You remember my chief of staff, Victoria. And this is Abigail Carter, my new reader." Marcus's attention shifted to Abby, his gaze appraising in a way that made her skin crawl. "A reader? How charmingly analog of you, Alex. In the age of audiobooks and AI, you still prefer the human touch." "Some things technology simply can't replicate," Alexander replied smoothly. "Abby brings nuance to the written word that no algorithm can match." Sophia Whitaker extended a manicured hand to Abby. "Pleasure to meet you, Ms. Carter. What a fascinating position. I imagine you get to read quite the variety of material." "Please, call me Abby. And yes, the variety is eye-opening." She chose her words carefully, aware of Alexander's slight nod of approval beside her. "I hope Alex pays you well to deal with his eccentricities," Marcus said with a wink that was probably meant to be charming, but felt oddly threatening. "He always did prefer things done his way." "A trait we once shared, as I recall," Alexander countered. "Victoria will show you to your suite. Dinner is at 8 in the main dining hall." As Victoria led the Whitakers away, Alexander's hand found Abby's elbow. "Your observations," he murmured. "He's trying too hard," Abby whispered back. "All that backslapping and forced joviality, it feels like he's overcompensating. And there's something in the way he looks at you. Not quite hatred, but close." Alexander's lips curved in a subtle smile. "Excellent. What about his wife?" "Harder to read. Polished. Controlled. But she was studying you. Very carefully when she thought no one was watching. Sophia is far more dangerous than Marcus," Alexander said quietly. "Remember that." Before Abby could ask what he meant, Congressman James Wheeler approached, accompanied by Diana Frost, the media mogul Alexander had mentioned earlier. The introductions continued, a blur of powerful names and calculating smiles. By the time dinner was announced, Abby's head spun with the effort of remembering names, affiliations, and the complex web of relationships Alexander had outlined. She found herself seated halfway down the long dining table between Eleanor and a tech journalist named Ryan Morgan. "So, the mysterious reader," Ryan said as servers poured wine. "How long have you worked for our host?" Abby took a sip of water, buying time. "Not long, it's a recent arrangement." Interesting timing, joining his household right before his biggest social event of the year. Ryan's tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp. "Pierce isn't known for bringing new staff into his inner circle without extensive vetting." "I suppose I was in the right place at the right time," Abby replied non-committally. From her position, she could observe Alexander at the head of the table, flanked by Diana Frost and Sophia Whitaker. He navigated the conversation with remarkable skill for someone who couldn't see the subtle visual cues most people relied on. The raised eyebrows, the exchanged glances, the micro-expressions that revealed more than words. "Pierce fascinates me," Ryan continued, following her gaze. "A tech visionary who became a privacy advocate after his accident. The ultimate contradiction, a billionaire fighting against the very surveillance capitalism that made him rich." "People change," Abby said. "Perspectives evolve." Ryan laughed. "Not in my experience, especially not people with that much power. Everyone here has an agenda, Abby. Everyone. The question is whether they're honest about it." Across the table, Marcus Whitaker was deep in conversation with Congressman Wheeler, their heads bent together in apparent confidentiality. Abby strained to catch fragments of their exchange. Regulatory committee is on board, but we need to move quickly. Pierce suspects nothing, because if he's bringing in new staff, completely in the dark, trust me, by Monday morning. Their voices dropped even lower, making it impossible for Abby to hear more without being obvious. She made a mental note to report this exchange to Alexander later. The evening progressed through multiple courses of exquisite food, wines paired, with expert precision and conversation that flowed like the tide, sometimes deep, sometimes shallow, but always with currents running beneath the surface. Abby watched as alliances formed and dissolved over coffee and dessert, noted how certain guests deliberately positioned themselves near others during the transition to after-dinner drinks in the salon. It was well past midnight when Alexander finally indicated it was time for them to withdraw. As they walked through the quieter corridors of the East Wing, Abby could hear the muffled sounds of the party continuing without them. "You did well tonight," Alexander said as they reached the door to his private study. "Come inside. I want to hear your impressions while they're still fresh." His study was dimly lit, the fire in the hearth casting dancing shadows across the walls. Alexander moved with confidence through the space, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey without hesitation. "I'm not really a whiskey drinker," Abby admitted as he offered her a glass. "Tonight seems like a good night to start," he replied with a hint of amusement. "You've earned it." She accepted the glass, taking a tentative sip. The liquid burned pleasantly down her throat, warming her from within. Now, Alexander settled into a leather armchair, gesturing for her to take the one opposite. "Tell me what you saw." For the next hour, Abby recounted her observations. The whispered conversation between Marcus and the congressman, Diana Frost's curious interest in Alexander's security protocols, the way certain guests seemed to form clusters that dissolved whenever Victoria approached. Alexander listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification or more detail. His face revealed little, but his questions grew increasingly specific, suggesting he was fitting her observations into a larger puzzle she couldn't yet see. "There's something else," she said finally, hesitant but compelled by the whiskey's warmth and Alexander's attentiveness. "Something about the way people react to you." "Oh?" His eyebrow arched with interest. "They're afraid of you," she continued, surprising herself with her boldness. "Not physically intimidated, but wary, like you know secrets they don't want revealed. Even Victoria, who clearly respects you enormously, seems to keep certain things carefully hidden." Alexander was silent for a long moment, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Perception is a curious thing, Abby. People often fear what they don't understand. My blindness makes them uncomfortable. They can't tell what I'm thinking because they can't read my eyes. And yes, perhaps they worry about what else I might perceive that others miss." "Is that why you invited me to stay? Because being an outsider gives me a different perspective?" "Partly," he set down his glass, "but also because you have something they don't." "What's that?" "Nothing to lose." His unseeing eyes seemed to find her face in the firelight. "Everyone in that dining room tonight has wealth, status, or power to protect. You came here with none of those things, which makes you uniquely qualified to see the truth." The statement stung, though Abby knew he hadn't meant it unkindly. Still, it served as a stark reminder of the gulf between them, between her ordinary life in Brooklyn and his rarefied world of privilege and influence. "I should get some rest," she said, setting down her unfinished whiskey. "Tomorrow will be another long day of observation." Alexander tilted his head slightly. "Have I offended you?" "No," she lied, then sighed. "Maybe a little. Being reminded of my lack of status, wealth, and power isn't exactly flattering." To her surprise, he laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his serious features. "Abby Carter, you misunderstand me completely. Those things, status, wealth, power, they're burdens as often as they're advantages. They distort perspective, corrupt judgment, isolate the soul." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Your freedom from such burdens is what I find most valuable about you." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard, making her heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with the whiskey. Before she could respond, there was a soft knock at the study door. "Come in," Alexander called. Eleanor entered, her face drawn with concern. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Pierce, but there's been an incident. Mr. Whitaker's laptop is missing from his suite. He's quite upset and making accusations." Alexander sighed, rising to his feet. "I need to handle this. Abby, we'll continue our conversation tomorrow." He paused, then added, "Lock your door tonight, and if anyone asks what we discussed this evening—" "We were reviewing poetry for tomorrow's reading," she supplied smoothly. His smile was warm with approval. "You're learning quickly." After they'd gone, Abby made her way to her suite, mind racing with everything she'd witnessed that day. As she prepared for bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was becoming entangled in something far more complex and potentially dangerous than she'd anticipated. She checked her phone, several missed calls from Melissa, a text from her manager at the diner asking why she hadn't shown up for her shift. Her real life was continuing without her, already beginning to slip away as Windward Estate pulled her deeper into its orbit. Just as she was about to turn off the light, her phone chimed with an incoming message from an unknown number. "Be careful who you trust on that island. Even the blind can be deceived when they want to believe. Get out while you can." Abby stared. At the cryptic warning, a chill running down her spine despite the warmth of her room. She checked the door twice to make sure it was locked, before finally falling into an uneasy sleep, dreaming of shadowed figures whispering secrets just beyond her hearing. Morning came with a soft knock at her door. Abby opened it to find Eleanor, already dressed and carrying a small tray with coffee. "Mr. Pierce requests you join him for a private breakfast on the East Terrace in 30 minutes, she said, handing Abby the steaming mug. "And he asked me to give you this." Eleanor pressed a small object into Abby's palm, a vintage silver key on a delicate chain. "What is this?" Abby asked, turning the key over in her hand. "The key to the lighthouse," Eleanor replied with a small smile. "Mr. Pierce said you would understand its significance after your discussion this morning." As Eleanor withdrew, Abby stood puzzled, examining the antique key. The lighthouse. She had seen it yesterday during her exploration of the grounds. A picturesque structure standing sentinel at the island's northeastern point, seemingly unused for years. Why would Alexander give her access to it? And why now, after the unsettling events of the previous evening and the mysterious warning on her phone? The solstice gathering was only beginning, but Abby already sensed that beneath the polished veneer of social pleasantries and luxury, currents of deception and danger were swirling. The question was whether she could navigate them without being pulled under, and whether Alexander Pierce was offering her a lifeline or leading her deeper into treacherous waters. The East Terrace of Windward Estate offered a panoramic view of the Atlantic Ocean, the morning sun casting golden light across the rippling waves. When Abby arrived, Alexander was already seated at a small table set for two, his face turned toward the warmth of the sun. The lighthouse she had noticed during her explorations stood in the distance, its white tower stark against the blue sky. "Good morning, Abby," Alexander said, hearing her approach. "Did you sleep well?" "Not particularly," she admitted, fingering the silver key that now hung around her neck. "Between the mysterious text message and this key Eleanor delivered this morning, I have more questions than answers." Alexander gestured to the chair opposite him. "Please sit. Coffee?" As she settled into the chair, Abby studied his face, searching for clues to his intentions. "Alexander, what's really happening here? This isn't just about observing your guests anymore, is it?" He sighed, his expression growing serious. "No, it isn't. The truth is more complicated and potentially more dangerous than I initially shared with you." A server appeared with breakfast trays, temporarily halting their conversation. When they were alone again, Alexander leaned forward. "For the past year, I've been developing a new technology, one that could fundamentally alter how privacy works in the digital age. It's called Obscura." "What does it do?" Abby asked, her coffee forgotten. "In simplest terms, it creates impenetrable digital privacy without sacrificing connectivity. Current encryption can be broken with enough computing power. Obscura operates on an entirely different principle, one that would render mass surveillance technologically impossible. Abby frowned. That sounds like something that would make a lot of powerful people very unhappy. Precisely. Alexander's smile was grim. Intelligence agencies, data harvesting corporations, governments that rely on surveillance, all would lose capabilities they currently take for granted. I've kept the development tightly controlled, known only to a handful of trusted engineers. But someone found out, Abby guessed. Alexander nodded. 3 weeks ago, there was an attempted breach of our secure development servers. The attempt failed, but it was sophisticated enough to concern me. Then, one by one, key members of my development team reported strange occurrences. Break-ins where nothing was taken, unusual surveillance, personal threats. A chill ran down Abby's spine despite the morning sun. And you think someone at this gathering is behind it? I'm certain of it. The timing of this year's solstice gathering isn't coincidental. Monday morning, I'm announcing Obscura to the world and releasing it as open-source software. Whoever wants to stop that from happening is likely here, making their final play. Abby's mind raced. Marcus Whitaker. The conversation I overheard with Congressman Wheeler, they mentioned something happening by Monday morning. Marcus has the most obvious motive, Alexander agreed. His company, Nexus Analytics, would lose billions if Obscura becomes standard. But Diana Frost's media empire relies heavily on user data harvesting as well. And Congressman Wheeler sits on the Intelligence Committee. He might have governmental interests at stake. So that's why I'm really here, Abby said slowly. Not just to observe social dynamics, but to help you identify who's trying to sabotage your project. Alexander's fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup. You're uniquely positioned to help. You have no known connection to me or my company. No one would suspect you as my ally in this matter. He paused. The missing laptop incident last night was a diversion. While everyone was focused on that, someone accessed my private servers. They're getting desperate. But why give me the lighthouse key? Abby touched the silver key at her neck. What does that have to do with any of this? Alexander's expression softened. The lighthouse contains my most secure workspace, a completely analog environment where I develop my most sensitive ideas, free from any possibility of digital surveillance. It's also where I've stored the complete Obscura code and documentation, separate from any network. He hesitated. If anything happens to me before Monday's announcement, I need someone I can trust to ensure Obscura reaches the public. The implication of his words hung heavy in the air between them. You think you're in danger, Abby said, her voice barely above a whisper. I think we both are, he corrected gently. By bringing you into my confidence, I've placed a target on your back as well. For that, I apologize. Before Abby could respond, Victoria appeared at the terrace entrance. Mr. Pierce, the morning activities are about to begin. The guests are gathering in the main hall. Thank you, Victoria. We'll be right there. When she had gone, Alexander turned back to Abby. Today will be crucial. Stay close to the people I've identified, especially when I'm not present, and meet me at the lighthouse at sunset. There's more you need to know. As they rejoined the gathering, Abby felt the weight of her new responsibility pressing down on her. What had begun as an accidental adventure was now something far more significant and potentially life-altering. The day unfolded in a series of carefully orchestrated activities, a sailing excursion around the island, an exclusive wine tasting led by a celebrated sommelier, and an informal lunch on the main lawn. Through it all, Abby observed the key players Alexander had identified, noting their interactions and conversations while maintaining her role as Alexander's unassuming reader. During the afternoon lawn games, she found herself partnered with Ryan Morgan, the tech journalist, for croquet. Quite the rarefied atmosphere, isn't it? Ryan commented as they strolled across the manicured grass. Hard to believe real-world problems exist when you're in a place like this. I imagine that's part of the appeal, Abby replied, keeping her tone casual. Ryan positioned his ball for a shot. You know, I've been trying to figure you out, Abby Carter. A reader seems like an anachronistic position for someone your age, especially for a tech innovator like Pierce. There's something to be said for human connection in an increasingly digital world. Indeed, Ryan's shot sent his ball through the wicket with perfect precision. Or perhaps it's about keeping certain information completely offline. When Abby didn't respond, he continued, "There are rumors about a new Pierce technology project, something called Obscura. Any chance that's what you've been reading to him?" Abby's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. "Mr. Pierce has diverse reading interests. I wouldn't know anything about his business projects." Ryan studied her face. "You're good, Abby. The perfect picture of innocent ignorance, but I've been covering tech for 15 years. I know when something big is brewing." He leaned closer. "And I know Alexander Pierce doesn't bring strangers into his inner circle without a very good reason." Before she could respond, a commotion erupted near the main house. Security personnel were moving quickly toward one of the guest wings. "Excuse me," Abby murmured, abandoning their game and hurrying toward the disturbance. She found Alexander, standing with Victoria outside one of the suites, his expression grave. "What happened?" she asked. "Someone broke into Diana Frost's suite," Victoria said tersely. "Her tablet and personal files were rifled through." Alexander turned toward Abby's voice. "Would you mind escorting me to my study? I need to dictate some correspondence before dinner." Once they were alone in the corridor, he spoke in a low voice. It wasn't Diana's suite they were after. It was a distraction to cover access to the East Wing servers. Someone's getting increasingly desperate to find Obscura. "Alexander, Ryan Morgan was asking me about Obscura just now. How would he know about it?" Alexander's brow furrowed. "Ryan's well connected in tech circles. He might have heard whispers, or he might be working with whoever's trying to steal it," Abby finished. "Alexander, I think we should postpone the sunset meeting at the lighthouse. If someone's watching your movements, all the more reason to proceed as planned," he countered. "The lighthouse is the one place on this island that I'm certain is secure. Use the nature walk as cover. Most guests will be preparing for dinner during that time. I'll meet you there." The afternoon crept by with agonizing slowness. Abby felt increasingly paranoid, noticing every glance, every whispered conversation among the guests. When the guided nature walk was announced, she joined the small group, setting out along the coastal path, then quietly broke away when they passed near the lighthouse trail. The ancient structure stood solitary against the darkening sky, its beacon not yet lit for the evening. The silver key fit perfectly into the weathered door at its base. Inside, spiral stairs led upward, the walls rough stone and the air cool and damp. At the top, Abby found not the expected lighthouse keeper's quarters, but a surprisingly modern and comfortable office space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 360-degree view of the island and surrounding ocean, now painted in the fiery hues of sunset. Alexander was nowhere to be seen. Abby checked her watch. She was right on time. Perhaps he'd been delayed. She moved around the circular room, noting the antique desk covered with handwritten notes, the walls lined with bookshelves, the comfortable reading chairs positioned to catch the best natural light. This was clearly a sanctuary for Alexander, a place that accommodated his blindness while providing the security he needed for his most sensitive work. On the desk lay a leather-bound notebook, open to a page filled with elegant handwriting. Beside it sat a sealed envelope with her name written on it. With trembling fingers, Abby opened the envelope and began to read. "Abby, if you're reading this alone, then my fears have been realized. The threat was closer than I anticipated. Inside the desk drawer, you'll find a waterproof case containing everything needed to release Obscura to the world. The complete code, documentation, and authentication credentials. Trust no one at Windward except Eleanor. She knows what to do if I'm unable to complete the announcement myself. The world needs Obscura, Abby. More than that, it needs people who believe privacy is worth protecting. People like you, who see the truth behind the facades we construct. I'm sorry for bringing you into this danger, but I'm not sorry for the time we've shared, brief though it may be. Alexander." Abby's blood ran cold. The letter implied Alexander had expected to be prevented from meeting her. She rushed to the desk drawer, finding the waterproof case exactly as described. As she lifted it, she heard footsteps on the spiral stairs. Heart pounding, she looked around for somewhere to hide, but the open design of the lighthouse top offered no concealment. She clutched the case to her chest, backing toward the windows as the footsteps grew closer. The door swung open. "Abby." Alexander stepped into the room, his face drawn with tension. "Thank God you're here." Relief flooded through her. "Alexander, your letter. I thought something had happened to you. I left that as a precaution in case I couldn't make it." He moved toward her with his customary confidence, despite his blindness. "Did anyone see you come here?" "No, I was careful." She set the case down on the desk. "But Alexander, things are escalating quickly. During the nature walk, I overheard Marcus telling someone on the phone that everything is in place for tonight. Whatever they're planning, it's happening soon." Alexander nodded grimly. "I suspected as much. That's why I've made arrangements for us to leave the island immediately after dinner. A boat is waiting at the private dock on the north side." Something in his tone gave Abby pause. "Leave? But what about your announcement on Monday?" "Plans change when circumstances demand it." He moved closer, his hand reaching for hers. "I need you to trust me, Abby." She allowed him to take her hand, but something felt wrong. His grip was different, the pressure, the positioning of his fingers. And there was something else. "Your aftershave," she said suddenly. "It's different." A slight smile curved his lips. "Is it? I hadn't noticed." In that moment, certainty crystallized in Abby's mind. "You're not Alexander." The man's smile disappeared, replaced by a cold calculation she had never seen on Alexander's face. "Clever girl. Marcus said you were sharper than you appeared." "Marcus?" Whitaker stepped into the lighthouse room, followed by Victoria Harrington. "I told you she'd figure it out, Jason," Marcus said to the Alexander impersonator. "Our Ms. Carter is quite the observer." "How?" Abby began, backing away until she hit the window. "How did we create such a perfect double?" Marcus finished for her. "Jason here has been studying Alexander for months. His mannerisms, his voice, his habits. The voice was the hardest part, but with enough practice," he shrugged. "As for the rest, most people are remarkably unobservant. They see what they expect to see." "Where is Alexander?" Abby demanded, trying to keep the fear from her voice. "Temporarily indisposed," Victoria said coolly. "He'll recover, though his pride may not. We only need to control the situation until Monday's announcement is safely cancelled." Marcus picked up the waterproof case from the desk. "Obscura cannot be allowed to exist, Ms. Carter. Do you have any idea what would happen to the global economy if true digital privacy became universally available? The entire infrastructure of data collection and analysis that drives modern business would collapse overnight." "That's not your decision to make," Abby said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Actually, it is." Marcus's face hardened. "Some ideas are too dangerous to release into the world. Alexander has always been an idealist. He doesn't understand the practical realities of the systems he's trying to disrupt." Victoria checked her watch. "We need to move. The dinner gong will sound in 20 minutes, and Alexander's absence will be noticed." "What about her?" Jason asked, nodding toward Abby. "Or she'll stay here until after dinner," Marcus decided. "By then we'll have secured everything we need, and she can be safely returned to New York with an appropriate cover story. No harm done." "You really think I'll just stay quiet about this?" Abby challenged. Marcus smiled without warmth. "Who would believe you? A waitress from Brooklyn against one of the most powerful men in tech? Besides, there will be nothing to prove by morning. Obscura will be gone, as will all evidence of its existence." As they turned to leave, locking her in, the lighthouse, Abby felt a strange calm descend over her. The initial panic gave way to clarity. Alexander had trusted her with Obscura for a reason. He had seen something in her that others missed, a determination, an integrity that wouldn't bend even in the face of intimidation. The lighthouse door closed with a heavy thud, the key turning in the lock. Through the windows, Abby watched Marcus, Victoria, and the imposter making their way back toward the main house, the waterproof case securely in Marcus's possession. What they didn't know, what Alexander had clearly anticipated, was that the case they'd taken wasn't the only copy. Abby reached into her pocket, pulling out the small flash drive she'd instinctively grabbed from a hidden compartment in the desk drawer when she'd first read Alexander's letter. Engraved on its surface was a single word: Veritas, truth. Alexander had been playing a longer game than anyone realized. He'd known his enemies would make their move eventually, and had prepared accordingly. The question now was whether Abby could complete what he had started. She examined the lighthouse room more carefully, looking for any means of escape. The windows were secure, the door solidly locked. But as her gaze swept the bookshelves, she noticed something odd, a volume that protruded slightly more than the others. Pulling it revealed a hidden panel behind the bookshelf, and beyond that, a narrow staircase descending through the rock beneath the lighthouse. An escape route. Alexander had thought of everything. The hidden passage led to a small cove on the opposite side of the island from the main house. A weathered rowboat was pulled up on the shore, oars stowed beneath the seats. In the distance, lights from Windward Estate glowed against the darkening sky. The dinner gong would be sounding soon, and her absence would eventually be noticed. Abby faced a choice: try to return to the main house to find and help Alexander, or take the boat and escape with the true copy of Obscura, ensuring it would reach the world as he had intended. The weight of the decision pressed upon her as she stood on the rocky shore, the flash drive clutched in her palm. In the end, the decision made itself. Alexander had entrusted her with Obscura because he believed she would do what was necessary to protect it. The best way to honor that trust wasn't to attempt a heroic rescue, it was to complete the mission he had given her. With newfound determination, Abby pushed the rowboat into the water and began rowing away from Osprey Island, away from the glittering world of wealth and power that had briefly enveloped her. The rhythmic splash of the oars and the gentle rocking of the boat calmed her racing thoughts, allowing her to plan her next steps. 2 hours later, she reached the mainland, her arms aching but her resolve unshaken. From a small coastal town's public library, she sent emails to every major tech publication and privacy advocacy group, using the authentication credentials from the flash drive to verify the legitimacy of Obscura. Then she called the one person she knew she could trust, Eleanor. "They have him in the old boathouse," Eleanor confirmed in a hushed voice. "Security is minimal. They don't want to raise suspicions among the guests. I can help him escape once." "Dinner is over." "Tell him I have Veritas," Abby said. "He'll understand, and Eleanor, thank you for everything." "It's he who should thank you, my dear, and I believe he will, very soon." 48 hours later, the tech world exploded with the news. Obscura, a revolutionary privacy technology, had been released to the public domain. Reports of attempted corporate suppression added fuel to the media fire. By Monday morning, Alexander Pierce was giving interviews from a secure location, explaining how his former partner had attempted to prevent Obscura's release. Marcus Whitaker, Victoria Harrington, and several accomplices faced federal charges for kidnapping, corporate espionage, and fraud. The imposter, Jason, had disappeared, rumored to have fled the country ahead of prosecution. And Abby Carter. She sat in a small cafe in Manhattan, watching the news unfold on the television above the counter. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Turn around." Alexander stood in the doorway of the cafe, looking somewhat worse for wear but very much alive. Without his usual security detail or the trappings of wealth, he seemed more human, more approachable. "How did you find me?" Abby asked as he joined her at the table. "Eleanor, she said you mentioned this place was your favorite thinking spot." He smiled, the genuine smile she'd grown to recognize, not the polished one he showed the world. "You did it, Abby. Obscura is free beyond anyone's ability to suppress it now." "We did it," she corrected. "I just followed the breadcrumbs you left. You planned for this possibility all along, didn't you?" "I hoped it wouldn't come to that. But yes, what I didn't plan for was finding someone like you, someone who would see the truth when others saw only what they wanted to believe." His hand found hers across the table. "The question now is, what's next?" Abby considered the question. Her old life, the double shifts at the diner, the cramped apartment. The day-to-day struggle seemed distant now, as though belonging to someone else. The woman who had accidentally stepped into the world of Windward Estate was not the same one who had emerged from it. "I'm not going back to waiting tables if that's what you're asking," she said with a small smile. "This experience has shown me there are more important things I could be doing." "Such as?" "Helping people see the truth behind the facades we all construct. Maybe in journalism, maybe in advocacy work. I'm not sure yet, but I know that's the direction." Alexander nodded, understanding. "Not working for me, then." "I think we both know that wouldn't be wise." Her fingers tightened briefly around his. "At least not right now. I need to find my own path first. Establish myself independent of everything that happened on that island." "Fair enough." He withdrew his hand reluctantly. "But when you figure out that path, when you know where you want to go and who you want to be, call me. Not as a billionaire or a tech visionary or any of those labels, just as a man who sees you clearly, even without his sight." As Alexander rose to leave, he placed something on the table between them, the silver lighthouse key on its delicate chain. "This still belongs to you," he said softly. "Consider it both a reminder and a promise. The light is always there to guide you home, Abby Carter, whenever you're ready to return." Abby watched him navigate through the cafe and out onto the bustling Manhattan street, where he was quickly absorbed into the anonymous flow of humanity. She lifted the lighthouse key, feeling its weight and history in her palm before slipping the chain over her head. Some might see the key as a symbol of the extraordinary adventure that had changed her life forever. Others might view it as an invitation back to a world of wealth and privilege she had only briefly glimpsed. But for Abby, the lighthouse key represented something more profound, the illumination that comes from seeing clearly, even in darkness. 6 months later, Abby stood outside the offices of the Veritas Project, a new non-profit dedicated to digital privacy advocacy and education. As its founding director, she had spent weeks preparing for this day, the official launch of their first initiative. She touched the lighthouse key that still hung around her neck, drawing strength from its familiar weight. Then she opened the doors to greet the gathered press and supporters. Alexander Pierce stood at the back of the crowd, no longer the isolated figure from Windward Estate, but still commanding attention without effort. Their eyes met across the room, and he offered a subtle nod of approval. Stepping to the podium, Abby addressed the audience with newfound confidence. "Truth is not merely about facts," she began. "It's about clarity, seeing beyond the facades we construct and the stories we tell ourselves. At the Veritas Project, we believe privacy isn't just a right. It's the foundation upon which authentic human connection is built." As she spoke, she recognized faces in the crowd. Eleanor, now retired from Windward Estate and serving as an advisor to the project. Ryan Morgan, the tech journalist who had ultimately helped expose Marcus Whitaker's crimes. Even Victoria Harrington, recently released on bail and attending perhaps out of curiosity, perhaps out of contrition. Our first initiative, the Obscura Education Program, will help ordinary citizens understand and implement privacy tools in their daily digital lives. Because privacy isn't just for the wealthy or the technical, it belongs to everyone. The presentation continued, but Abby found her gaze repeatedly drawn to Alexander. They had maintained a careful distance during her transition from waitress to privacy advocate, both understanding that her credibility required independence from his influence. After the formal presentation, as the crowd mingled during the reception, Alexander finally approached her, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "Congratulations, Director Carter," he said, offering her a glass. "The Veritas Project is everything I hoped it would be, and more because it's truly yours." "Not entirely mine," she corrected with a smile. "Your foundation's support made it possible, even if we kept that quietly behind the scenes." "Merely resources," he shrugged. "The vision is yours." He hesitated, then added, "I've respected your need for distance these past months, Abby. I haven't called, haven't interfered. I wanted to give you the space to find your own path." "I know, and I appreciate that." She touched the lighthouse key at her neck. "Some journeys need to be taken alone, at least for a while." And now? His question held no pressure, only patient curiosity. Abby considered the man before her, no longer the mysterious billionaire of Windward Estate or the subject of her strange adventure, but simply Alexander, brilliant, flawed, and seeing her with a clarity that had nothing to do with physical sight. "Now," she said softly, "I think I'm ready to see where this path leads. Together, if that's still what you want." His smile was answer enough. "I once told you that the most trustworthy people are those who have already shown you their capacity for deception. But I was only half right." He took her hand gently in his. "The most trustworthy people are those who, having seen the truth, cannot go back to living with lies, not even the comfortable ones we tell ourselves." As they stood together amid the celebration of her new beginning, Abby realized that the mistaken delivery that had brought her to Osprey Island had actually been the most fortunate error of her life. It had shown her not just a different world, but a different version of herself, one capable of courage, discernment, and purpose beyond anything she had imagined. The lighthouse key around her neck was no longer just a reminder of the past, but a beacon illuminating the future, one where truth and authenticity would light the way forward, no matter how dark the surrounding waters might become. Fim de Historia. Dear listeners, we hope that Abby and Alexander's journey from mistaken identity to profound connection has moved you as deeply as it moved us to create it. Their story reminds us that sometimes our greatest discoveries come when we're mistaken for someone else, only to find ourselves in the process. If this tale of truth, deception, and illumination resonated with you, we've prepared a special playlist featuring similarly captivating stories of unexpected connections and life-changing encounters. You'll find it by clicking the link to your left. Enjoyed The Lighthouse Key? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore the complexity of human relationships and the power of authenticity in a world of facades. What would you do if mistaken identity led you to an extraordinary adventure? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. Until our next story,